Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria and today's video is just going to be another reading vlog. So just going to be going through everything I'm reading this week, and it's kind of going to inadvertently turn into a continuing series I'm in the middle of because of the books that I'm choosing to read. But yeah, at the minute I'm in between I don't even know how many series, so I really do need to make a real effort to try and continue the series that I'm in the middle of before I'm starting new series. But I mean, we'll see how we go. That never seems to work out. But the first book I'm reading this week is one that I'm really excited about. So you may have seen me mention it in some of my most anticipated books for 2024 videos, or like my yearly TBR and things like that, things I really want to get to. And it's Air by Sabaa Tahir. So this is kind of a companion series to her An Ember in the Ashes series. It's kind of a follow-on almost from that series. So it's after the events of that series, and it's following some characters who may or may not have been mentioned in that series. So I won't give you too much of a synopsis in terms of what it's about, but it basically follows relatives of some of the people in that series, and I'll read a little bit more before I can give a bit of a synopsis of what's going on, just so that I can make sure I'm not ruining anything from that series before I'm giving you any information. But yeah, I've highly anticipated this one. I absolutely adore An Ember in the Ashes, that series. So I did apply for the ARC on NetGalley and wasn't too sure if I was going to get it, but I managed to get approved. So I'm reading it at the moment. I'm around 20% in, and yeah, Sabaa Tahir's writing is just absolutely amazing. I loved it in An Ember in the Ashes and continuing to love it in this. So this one's kind of continuing a series. This is technically a different series, but I'm kind of continuing a series on this one as well. And then the other one I'm reading is A Song of Sorrow and Fate, and that is by LJ Andrews, and that's the last book in the Broken Kingdom series. So I think I'm around 30% in on that one, and again, I can't give you too much of a synopsis on that, but it's basically a series that is kind of almost full of interconnected trilogies almost. So it's one long story, but each of the kind of trilogies followed a different couple, or like different characters were the main characters. So in the first book we have Elise, who is the niece of the current king in this kingdom, and essentially she is just doing what she's told, doing what she's supposed to do as part of her duty to the kingdom, and part of that is to get married off to, you know, someone from a neighbouring kingdom to broker peace treaties and, you know, make the relationship stronger. Now as part of that she does get a dowry manager who is sent to kind of aid with any of the dowry negotiations, take her to and from those, and his name is Legion Grey. And basically the story kind of goes from there. There may be a little bit of a romance between those two, and a lot of different secrets and histories and things like that are evolved from that story. And honestly, the story from book one has massively evolved from then to now, because there's 9 books in this series, and this is a prequel series, or it's a series that was out before The Ever King. So again, it's kind of similar to Air, where The Ever King is kind of a continuation series from that original series. So follows characters that were maybe mentioned or cited within the series, but it's not technically a connected series. So you can read The Ever King without reading those books, but I'm a bit of a traditionalist with things like that, so I want to read this series first before moving on to The Ever King. And then once I'm finished those, I'm either going to move on to The Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole or Daisy Hates. So that one's a bit of a, I'm not too sure if I'm going to enjoy that one, so I'm not too sure if I will be pushed to pick it up, but depending on my mood, I am reading 2 fantasy books at the minute, so I may just need a bit of a, Daisy Hates is probably not a romance, but something that's not a fantasy to read in between those, so that I can kind of have a bit of a fresher palette for moving on to something like Throne of Broken Gods by Amber V. Nicole. So we'll see how I'm feeling after I've read these. As I say, I'm only like 20 and 30% into them, really loving them so far. I think Air so far is just, honestly, chef's kiss. Sabaa Tahir can do no wrong for me, so I'm absolutely loving it. But once I've read a little bit more, I'll give you a bit more of an update on kind of what the synopsis is. I'll be tactful in terms of what I can tell you what's going on, and just, yeah, let you know how I'm enjoying it and how I'm getting on. So just jumping on to give you a quick update on my reading. So I'll give you an update on Air first. So I'm currently around 55% into that one, and Honestly, I'm just really loving it. I'm so glad I got the arc. I'm so excited to continue reading, and yeah, it's got all of the magic, all of the amazing storytelling that An Ember in the Ashes had, and the writing is just amazing, and I can't gush anymore about Sabaa Tahir's writing, but I think I've read enough of it now to give you a little bit of a synopsis on what's going on without spoiling too much of the previous series. But first thing I will say is that with this one, you definitely need to read An Ember in the Ashes series before reading this, because I feel like there's a lot of world building and context that you will need to kind of make this fully fleshed out. There's a lot that kind of relies on the understandings of how that world worked and the events that happened in that series that make this much more impactful and enhance your experience of reading this. I mean, it's a well written book, you could probably just read it, but I just don't think you would really get that same experience that you'll get if you've read that series. So yeah, definitely recommend picking that up first. But as I say, around 55% in, and we're kind of following these three characters. One is an orphan. She's from this land that is basically very desolate, you know, they're starving, and essentially she's imprisoned by this kind of tyrant in that land, and he's going to want to try and use her, and essentially she manages to escape, and it takes her on a bit of a journey to another land. And then we're also following a character who is kind of this renowned tracker. She has actually been outcast from her family, so she's kind of part of this magical elite family who are able to track people with their powers, so with the wind, with the earth, and with water, by using their abilities that way. And basically this tracker has been given a job by someone, I can't say who, to track down this murderer who is basically going around this land murdering civilians by burning out their heart, and you know, they're left in a pretty bad way basically. So she has been tasked to try and find this murderer. But then we do also have a third point of view, who is the crown prince of this land as well, who has kind of trained his whole life to take on that role. He is going to become emperor one day, but he's kind of questioning if that's what he wants. And basically along the way, the story kind of brings these three characters together, and there is a bit of allyship there. Some of it is reluctant, there may be relationships forming and things like that, but I think the thing with Sabaa Tahir is her character work is just amazing. I always feel like I'm really rooting for the characters straight away. With this one, obviously there is some history from the characters who were present in An Ember in the Ashes, and that may be impacting my relationship with these characters, but I definitely just think her way of writing makes characters really realistic. You know, they may have inner monologues, but it always seems so real. You know, it doesn't seem cringe or anything like that. She's really talented at her dialogue, and even, as I say, her inner monologues, they always keep me entertained. And then the found family aspects that she builds, again, it's one that I always just really believe. I believe the relationships that she's building, they all seem very real. You get this kind of visceral reaction to them. So yeah, absolutely loving it. Really excited to continue reading it and see where it leaves off. I'm really scared there's going to be a huge cliffhanger, and this isn't even out yet, and I don't know how long I'll have to wait for the next book, but I'll just have to keep myself occupied with a reread of An Ember in the Ashes if that happens. But yeah, 55% in and really loving it. And then A Song of Sorrows and Fate, I'm almost finished actually. I think I've got around an hour left on the audiobook, so I'll probably be done that within today and tomorrow, potentially even tomorrow morning. So yeah, I am enjoying this one. I'd say it's probably my least favourite out of the series that I've read so far. I think with this one, obviously there's a lot of loose ends that need to be tied for the series to finish, and I think that is kind of impacting the flow a little bit. There's a lot of situational scenes that are set up to kind of explain why things happened the way they did, why things are now happening the way they are, and I just think it's taking away from the charm a little bit. There's a little bit of a convenient romance, which I don't mind. It's, you know, entertaining enough, but it doesn't quite have that depth that some of the other romances had, because basically this romance has been built over half a book, whereas the rest of the romances within the series were kind of over 2 or 3 books. So there's a big difference in terms of that kind of slow burn that I'm usually used to and that I usually enjoy more as well. So yeah, I'd say it's not bad or anything, but I'm definitely seeing little hints of where the Everking story is going to come in here. So I'm definitely happy that I've decided to finish this series before jumping into that series, because again, I think it'll just give me a little bit of context on the history of that world so that I can jump into that new series and really understand all of that world building in the background, and hopefully there'll be little Easter eggs in there that I'll notice from reading this series as well. So yeah, I'm liking it. I would say it's probably a bit of a mid book at the minute, so maybe like a 3 to 3.5 stars, but we'll see. There's still an hour and a half left of the audiobook, so that may change, but I think at the moment it is just kind of wrapping things up nicely, and hopefully that means that I'll be able to then, as I say, jump into the Everking and enjoy it a little bit more, because I'll have some of that context. So in terms of plans this evening, it's just very chill. We're not doing anything, I don't have to go anywhere, so I'll probably just read for an hour or so now just before I make dinner, and then I do have a bit of time tomorrow morning before work to catch up on some reading. So as I say, probably definitely finish finish A Song of Sorrows and Fate, and hopefully get a good chunk read of Air as well. I'm hoping to finish it tomorrow because I do want to move on to one of my other reads, but we'll see. I don't want to rush it. I want to really enjoy this because, as I say, it's just been a hugely anticipated release for me. But yeah, once I've read a bit more, I'll come back on here and give you a quick update. So just jumping on because I do have a quick update. I have finished Song of Sorrows and Fate. I keep getting that title wrong. So I finished that this morning and I did like it. I think I'm still going to rate it around a 3.5 because I wasn't as invested in the romance. There was a lot of just kind of tying up loose ends in this one, but I really like the way it finished off, and I do think that it's set up for the Ever King really well. I'll be really excited to kind of read that now that I've kind of got, it's almost like a prequel. It was almost like a prequel to what I imagine is going to happen in the Ever King just from reading the synopsis, but you did get a good bit of background on those characters. So yeah, I really liked it. 3.5, as I say. I think the last book in a series is always probably a difficult one to write, especially if it's been such a long series. But yeah, I mean, overall, still definitely really recommend the series. I've really loved it, and even, as I say, it was 3.5. It's not a bad rating at all. So I did love this one as well, but the rest of them I would say was probably more of a 4 on average. So yeah, really enjoyed the series, definitely recommend it. And then for Air, I'm probably at around 80% of that one, so not too much to read. I think there's around 2.5 hours left in the book, it says on my Kindle anyway, but as we all do, I'll probably try and beat that. But yeah, so I'm at the 80% mark and things are starting to get revealed, emotions are starting to get tugged, and the way that Saba always does, she makes me love these characters and inevitably will break my heart. But again, just absolutely loving it. I think if you can relate it to any author that you really love and getting a new book in a world that you love with slightly different characters but still basically having the core characters that you love from that series involved, heavily involved in the plot as well, that's kind of what it's been like for me. It's just been amazing to be able to read back in this world, in a world that I love so much. So yeah, I'm still at the 80% mark. I'll probably finish that tonight. My husband has a few things he has to do, so most of the night I'm probably just going to be reading anyway, so hopefully I'll finish that tonight and I'll be able to give you an update on that then tomorrow. And then I will have to pick out my next read, so it's probably going to be either Throne of Broken Gods by Amber V. Nicole or Daisy Hates, I'm thinking, because I may have more chance of finishing that before the weekend so that I can kind of wrap this vlog up for Sunday. But we'll see what I'm in the mood for. I'm in a very big fantasy mood at the moment, so I may just go for the Amber V. Nicole book. But yeah, other than that, I did get a new mug, which you will have seen in some of the B-roll. I'm obsessed with it. Anything to do with autumn, spooky season, and then when we get a bit later, it'll be Christmas mugs that you're going to be seeing. But basically seeing this, if you're in the UK, this is from Home Bargains. I think it was like £1.50, so really cheap, but I'm obsessed with it. So yeah, the rest of the night's just going to be probably chilling, have a bit of dinner, read a bit more later tonight, as I say, hopefully finish Air, and yeah, I'll give you an update tomorrow, hopefully once I'm finished. And apologies if you did hear a lot of pug noises in that last clip, because this one always decides to clean his paws as soon as I start filming, so yeah. So just jumping on to give you a quick update on my reading. I was supposed to come on yesterday, which was Friday, but I ended up puppy sitting for my sister, and yeah, just didn't get a chance to get on to give you an update. But you may have seen some of the B-roll. I did finish Air by Saba Tahir, and absolutely 5 stars. I really loved it. I mean, I had no doubt about it. I really love An Ember in the Ashes, and maybe it's a bias, I absolutely love Saba Tahir's writing as well, so maybe take my review with a pinch of salt because I am a bit of a fangirl for her. But yeah, I just thought it was really fast paced. The world building again was very immersive. It's very intricate in that series. There was a slow burn romance that'll kind of have you giggling, kicking your feet, all of that good stuff. But I would say from reading this first book that even though I've seen a few people say that you could read this as a standalone, for me personally I would say that you kind of need to read An Ember in the Ashes in that series before reading this one, because yes, you can kind of understand what's going on with the plot, and there is some explanation of how this world works, and she does quite a good job of summarising some of the stuff that happened in An Ember in the Ashes to get the world to where it is within this series. But I would definitely say if you want to have the best experience reading this book and kind of have that connection with some of what would be the side characters in this series, definitely read An Ember in the Ashes. It's an amazing series anyway, so it's really win-win if you read that first. But yeah, definitely I would say read that series first and then go into Air, because I just feel like it made the experience so much better for me. But yeah, absolutely loved it. So glad that I ended up getting an ARC for it, because it was really painful having to wait until October. But now it'll be painful waiting for the next book, because I don't even know when that will be out, seeing as this one isn't out yet. But I suppose it just gives me time to reread the whole series before that one comes out. And then because I finished that, I did move on to my next book. So it's The Throne of Broken Gods by Amberfield Nicole. Now this is the second book in the series of the Book of Azrael. So I read this one probably around a year and a few months ago, so just over a year ago I read this first one, and I believe the second one was just about to come out when I read this, so the intention was to read this and then read the second one and continue with the series. But of course I didn't end up reading it when I was supposed to. So this one, if you haven't heard about it, is following our main protagonist Diana, who has basically made this pact with this kind of monster demon in order to ensure her sister's safety. So her sister was dying and she makes a pact with this monster to kind of save her life essentially, but in doing so she ends up becoming a monster herself. And what I love about this series is the FMC is kind of quite morally grey, and it's not just she makes difficult decisions for the greater good. She actually is doing things that are, you know, pretty morally grey within this, and it's interesting to have an FMC who you're kind of rooting for, who does have that properly morally grey side as well. But basically in this first book, as part of her kind of servitude to Caden, who is the demon who has kind of made her into this monster, she is sent to find this artifact, which is basically the Book of Azrael. It's an artifact by, I believe Azrael is kind of a death god, and she's sent to find this artifact because it's said to hold a certain amount of power, and Caden basically wants it to pursue some of his plans. Now along the way of trying to find this artifact, Diana meets Sam Cale, who is basically known as the World Ender, and he is a god within this world, and he's basically just been isolated for the last few years and keeping himself to himself. But they end up coming across each other, and reluctantly they ally to find the Book of Azrael. They find it would be mutually beneficial, and the story kind of goes from there. At the end of this one we are left on quite a cliffhanger. Basically something really traumatic happens for Diana, and the second book is kind of picking up from there. So The Throne of Broken Gods, as I say, is picking up from the end of that second book, and we're just kind of reeling in the aftermath of what happens at the end there. At the start of this it's kind of almost like a cat and mouse chase. I won't say who between because it does kind of give spoilers for the first book, but a bit of a cat and mouse chase at the moment, you know, someone kind of chasing Diana within this book, and essentially we're just going through that narrative at the moment. So at the minute I'm around 35% of the way through, so it's quite a chunky book. I think there's around 750 pages or something like that in here, and I think I'm on, yep, page 288, so I'm a fair amount through. I only started it yesterday, so I've read a good chunk in that time. But yeah, I am enjoying this at the moment. I do feel, because it is that kind of cat and mouse chase at the moment, it is being a little bit repetitive, so I'll be interested to see how the narrative kind of pushes on and how long that continues in here. But I am enjoying it. I think as well Amberfield Nicole done a really good job of recapping the first book at the start of this, because I was concerned with how long ago I read it that I may have forgotten some of the details and some of the plot lines and things like that. But she did have kind of it was almost like a letter from Diana explaining basically the first book and the plot and everything that happened and how it ended. So it really helped me going into this without a reread, so that I could kind of know the main plot points and get immersed in the story much quicker. So yeah, as I say, around 35% through now. I'm just going to be reading probably for most of the rest of the day. I think the audiobook has around 8 hours on there, but if I read this physically I may be able to read it a little bit quicker, but we'll see. I'm going to try and get as much of it finished today as possible, and any that I don't get finished I'll obviously just finish it probably tomorrow morning or something like that. But I'm hoping I will get most of it finished today, and as soon as I've probably read a bit more I'll maybe give you an update later today, or if I do end up finishing it I'll just come on to kind of close out the vlog and give you my final thoughts on this one. lovelies, just jumping on here to round up the vlog because I have now finished Throne of Broken Gods by Amber V. Nicole, and yeah, I really like this one. I'm glad I did pick this one up because it had been a little bit of time since I'd read the Book of Azrael, and I was trying to remember what my real thoughts and feelings were about the writing and if I really enjoyed it, and I do think that I did. Now that I'm reading this, I do think that I got into the style of the writing. I think initially with Amber V. Nicole's writing, I kind of likened it to, if you ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer or any of those kind of 90s, early 2000s fantasy shows like that, it was quite a sarcastic humour. Like they'd be in the middle of like a battle scene and someone's jacket would get ripped and they go, hey, that was my favourite jacket. There's some of that humour in here, and I think at first I was kind of taken aback by that. I wasn't too sure how to feel about it, if it was cringe or if I was enjoying it or if I was enjoying it because it was cringe. But yeah, I could definitely see some of that humour coming out in this one as well. But overall, I think with this book, a lot of what it was touching upon was kind of grief, trauma, and the process of getting over that. And although this is like a fantasy book, I do think that some of the actions that were happening in here and some of the ways that people were dealing things and how that was maybe manifesting physically, because again, this is a fantasy book, were very poetically done in terms of, if you did liken this to everyday life and everyday grief, it kind of was a depiction of how that would maybe feel inside and how that can almost bring out, you know, the monster in people. And yeah, I thought it was a really good way to kind of depict that because of things that the characters in this were going through. What I will say is at the very start of it, kind of up until 40%, it was a little bit repetitive with, I think I mentioned before that it had that kind of cat and mouse chase, and I think that bit of it did feel a little bit long for me, so I felt like it was a little bit dragging, but at the same time I was enjoying kind of that depiction at the start as well. But that's the only reason I would say that I ended up landing on a 4-star for this one rather than a 5-star, because that first 40% was a little bit like, okay, are we going to get on with the plot here, or is this going to be the whole book? But once we got past that part, I would say that even though there wasn't a huge amount of plot progression up until maybe the 80% mark, what there was in here was definitely character development. So we got a lot more point of views in this. You basically, I think, got a point of view from all of the kind of main characters. So I do think that the character development in this was done really well, and we really got to explore some characters on a much deeper level. So for me, it really solidified that kind of found family aspect that you have in this one. And as I say, even though the plot progression wasn't quite there for me up until that 80% mark, I do think that this was a useful book to kind of solidify those characters that were introduced in the first book. And the first book has so much going on that it's not that the characters are on the back burner, it's just that it's setting up this world, setting up the history, setting up the plot, that it was nice to kind of have this time to really delve into those characters and understand their motives, their history, and kind of their perspective and where they're thinking about things. But yeah, really enjoyed this one. 4-star. I kind of want to read the next one now because it did leave on a cliffhanger, which is always the annoying thing with these books. But yeah, it ended on a cliffhanger, so I'm definitely intrigued to move on to the next one, see how that goes. But yeah, I'd say if you haven't picked up this series yet, definitely pick it up. I'm not sure how many books there's supposed to be in the series. I know that there's 3 out at the moment. I don't know if it's 4 or 5 books, but yeah, just fair warning, I don't think that this one's quite finished yet. I think the 3rd one just came out this year, so it is an unfinished series, and I do this to myself all the time. Start series that haven't ended yet, but it just means I might have to reread it in the future when the new ones come out. Really enjoyed this one, so definitely recommend it. Yeah, that's everything for this week. So obviously Air was my favourite read of this week. I wasn't in any doubt that that was going to be my favourite read. Absolutely 5-star. And then Song of Sorrows and Fate was still a good read, but yeah, as I say, just slightly less of a favourite as the other ones that were in that series. So all in all, I've had a pretty good week of reading. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. It'll be more videos like this, reading vlogs, book hauls, come shopping with me, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you did enjoy it, and I'll see you in my next one soon. Bye!